Kia ora, everybody. Hello. I'm just going to jump around a little bit and just tell you a few things about myself, illustrating a little bit about the way we work and the way we think, a little bit about the way I see the kind of the design world going. I really enjoyed Denise's talk and also Noel's talk, sort of in a way covering similar sort of ground to what I'm covering as well. Works good. D for design, for David. The calligraphers, some of them reckon it's the most perfect letter because I think it's because it's balanced. It's got the straight line and the curve. It's contained. The straight line holds the curve in place, and the curve keeps the line straight in tension. Perfect balance. And for me, balance is absolutely about what it's all about. It's got keeping a balance of everything. When things get out of balance, they start to go wrong. And if you put it on its side like that, it always comes back and sits flat. It sort of has its own equilibrium, which finds that balance again. And good systems do that. If you happen to put a mast on it, it becomes a boat. And boats are sort of important to me. So this was me 12, 15 years ago, my little garden studio in Havelock North. I was a designer maker, making my own designs as a craftsman, as a designer, making them in wood, mostly furniture. And then something happened. And it turned into this. Now this was a few years ago. I became part of a team instead of a one-man band. And the team sort of got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and now we're in this place. And there's about twice as many people as this working for me. And this is a new custom building that we've just had built for us by our current landlords, who built it to our design and then rented it back to us. So what made that transition? How did I go from the one-man band to this, to being a businessman? Mostly it was that. And that was the first piece I took to Europe in 2000. No, I did a show in 1999 when I had a predecessor to this, which sort of started things off and got things happening. But then when I took this one 2 years later to the Milan show for the first time, this was picked up by Cappellini. And I kind of joked that I went to Europe as a designer maker, and I came back as a designer. They saw me as a designer, and I was sort of picked up by Cappellini and asked to do other projects, and I thought, well, great, I've made it now. This is going to be different. And it didn't really. It sort of chugged along slowly. And I think the main problem is that tyranny of distance, as we call it, that the perception of distance from Europe to here is so much greater than vice versa. We can pick up the phone, we can Skype, we can contact Europe. To us, it's just around the corner. To them, it's the other side of the world. Oh, it's a bit expensive to phone, isn't it? So nothing really happened big after this. It was sort of, it made a step up. It was the next stage that really got things going. And this light, which I designed in 2003, I was working over in Perth. I tell this story because it's quite an interesting one from the design point of view of sort of students are thinking about how you go about things. This is my most successful light, and it led on to a whole lot of other stuff. And basically, it made the company what it is now. But it started as play. I was in Perth, I had some spare time. As a kid, I'd made cardboard models out of cardboard of polyhedra, dodecahedrons, icosahedrons, things like that. It was kind of fun. And I thought, I'll go back and have a look at that. And I found one which had 60 faces, which were all the same. And I thought, if I cut a shape out of that, I maybe fit them all together, I can make a sphere. And the thing about working with sheet material is that, as you know, you can't bend plywood both ways at the same time, so you can't make a sphere out of plywood. But if you cut the fingers, you can bend this one this way and that one that way, and you can now make a sphere. And that's kind of what I stumbled on with this. And I made it, and the plywood was too thick, and it broke, and I threw it away. And I came back to New Zealand and found some thinner plywood and did it again. I thought, oh, that's quite nice. And make a light. We'll put a bulb in it and see if it'll make a light. Yeah, it worked, and we sold a few. We sold a few more. I thought, oh, this is good. And it just went on from there. So the moral of the story is that don't kind of think you have to go out in the marketplace. and see what's there and identify a need and then design for it. Because the market will tell you what it already knows. You can tell it what it doesn't know. So what this did was taught me that the really successful designs are the ones which find something which didn't exist before. And you don't find that by doing market research. You find that by your own integrity, starting from scratch yourself and doing what you believe in. Now that's high risk because a lot of them will fail and it won't get you anywhere. But if you hit it right, like this, there was nothing in the world like that by accident. I mean, I didn't plan it that way, but it happened. We discovered there was this niche with nothing like that in the world, and so it took off from there. If you go out the other way and you do the market research, the risks are lower and you're more likely to make some money out of it, but you won't make the big money because you'll be doing what everybody else is doing because they're all following that same track. So this sort of led me on, and a whole bunch of other designs followed. And I've got this picture here just because I'm proud of him. He's my son, and he's a world record freediver. So he kind of, he's part of the story as well. And so out of this, we've developed this range of kit set lights. And that's the key thing for me, is because what I discovered with that, the first time I took that light to Milan, I took a hand rivet gun and some rivets, and I built it in the place where we were exhibiting. And a guy who was selling some of my stuff in London came around, and he said, "Look, why don't you put little plastic pushing clips instead of those rivets, and you can make it kit set?" Wow, yeah. So I went away and found some plastic clips and designed a kit set. And that has been key, because for a while, initially the corals and florals, these ones, they were easy. They were all the shapes were the same, so we made them as kit set and we sold them, and they were selling well. As I went on and developed other lights and taking the process I discovered with the computer and the surfaces and sort of making these different shaped lights, these, this was the first one. So these were all made out of X's, and as the X's go towards the top, they get smaller. So you can't sort of easily make that as a kit set, because how do you explain to the maker, the buyer, that way the grain goes, you've got to get it this way around, not that way around, and not upside down, and so on. So those are all made up, and it cost the same to send one of those to Australia as it did to buy the light. So obviously that was a bit of a put down for the people buying it. So I went back and redesigned them all as kit sets, and originally they would be built like that, packed in a box and sent off. Now they're like in a box that size. You can get 40 of those in that. So that has transformed our shipping and makes it possible for us to export much larger volumes from New Zealand, a whole range of lights. And I just changed the breakdown, kept the same outward appearance, but changed the breakdown of those shapes. So it's the same shapes repeated again and again and again. This series of zigzags. And then in order to sell the kit set as a sort of concept so that people don't think, oh, I've got to make it myself. Come on. We try to turn that round into something that's a positive. You're helping the planet by reducing all those trucks on the road. Think of it. If there was a truck full of these, you'd have 40 trucks to carry the same amount as you carry that 40 the same amount of that one. So, yeah.
Were they all assembled by hand?
Our ones or the kit set ones?
When they in the big box.
Yeah.
They were put together by hand.
Yeah, with a rivet gun.
Yeah.
So we had a jig, and we set them up on the jig, and we bang, 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 bang. And it took an hour or two to put them together. Now we pass it on. But I like to say it's my gift to you, the buyer, because you get the satisfaction, fulfillment, and the pleasure of making it. So we've got a lot of feedback because, I started off doing this, I thinking, oh, blimey, I've got to make this thing, But hey, I really enjoyed that. That was fun. And so it's turned it around into a positive thing that we're trying to make. And then we have this whole story of the seed system. Why put one tree in a truck to get it from A to B when you can fill the truck with seeds and then have the fun of watching them grow? And it's this participation thing. So there's a kind of shift in the way in which people are buying things. 5 years ago, there was this crazy sort of binge of consumerism of people going out and buying stuff every few years until it was made to look out of date, and then coming back and buying something more. They didn't care if it was going to last. They just wanted to keep on buying and buying. And then, with the whole world crash and all this sort of stuff, that habit has completely changed. And now what people are looking for is value and stories and emotional involvement. They want more for their money, and they want to be able to keep it. So by getting them to buy into the product through this assembly, they are already emotionally involved in that product. They're more likely to keep it because of that investment on their part. It suddenly becomes they have a feeling for this, they want to keep it, they made it. And so I think it's really important that you think about this when you're thinking about the market now. We're moving on from this consumer binge of stuff to a market that's much more critical about what it looks for in terms of its value and what it's getting. There are companies which are complaining that the market is crashing, it's terrible, business has never been so bad. There are others who are saying, no, it's never been so good. And I wonder why. And the other part of our story, which is really important, is that I really care for the environment. In some ways, I almost sort of feel, well, hell, I shouldn't even be doing this. Everything that we do creates pollution, creates problems, uses up resources. Can I justify it? And sometimes it's very hard. And obviously everyone else is concerned about this as well. So should we even be buying this stuff? So we try to make ourselves as green as we can. I make no claims that I'm a sustainable designer, I'm an eco-designer, I create sustainable design. What I claim is that we care and we're desperately trying all the time to improve and reduce our impact on the planet and the people on it and life on it. So just some of the things we do. We're part of the Enviromark. We've got our Enviromark Bronze. We're working through the next stages of that. So that's like a life cycle management system that shows that every aspect of your business is considered in terms of how it treats people and the environment. We did a life cycle analysis of one of our products, which combined most of the materials. So we know pretty much where the hot spots are. And the first one that came up was transport, was freight. And so a lot of the kit set adaptation came out of that analysis of freight. We've moved to this new workshop, which I tried to make as green as I could within a limited budget. We buy our electricity from Meridian, so it's 100% renewed electricity. And I looked into getting solar panels on the roof and all the rest of it, but per watt, that's really expensive. And it's actually much cheaper if they do it, and it's still renewable electricity, buying it through Meridian, through hydropower. And what we can't ultimately achieve by improvements, we try to offset through other schemes. So it's taken a bit of a while to get going, but I'm working with a school up at Nuhaka near Mahia to do a planting scheme with them, with the children, A, to plant more trees, but B, to encourage them to think about trees and caring for the forests. So we're funding a nursery there, they're building at the school. They can go and get seedling out of the forest or seeds out of the forest and then bring them on and then plant them out locally. And this is just very quick squiz around the workshop. So, hello, I'm Coral. I'm going to show you around. This is our new workshop. This is the showroom. So when you come in the front door there, you've got the design studio upstairs, and down underneath is the office, the front desk, where the receptionist sits and where the business manager works as well. And then that's the machine room in the back. There are 2 CNC machines, woodworking machines in the center here. So this is in the center of the building. On the left, there's the stock room where all the racking is, and on the right, there's the bench room, which is the next one. So that's where we do all the assembly of the stuff which you do assemble, or the sanding and packing of the kit sets. And so the sanding and packing happens over in the corner there. And we still do a certain amount of furniture as well. And then that's the stock room where all the kit sets are packed with all the different bits and pieces of the instructions and the labels and the cards and the electrics. And we discovered that stock is key to making sales. We carry $300,000 to $400,000 worth of stock in there because having the stock makes the sale. But we built that up over a few years to get to that point. And then that's going upstairs into the design studio, looking down into the showroom. Having our own space has enabled us to sort of teach shops how to display the stuff, and they've often come to us and said, oh, we really like the way you're doing it. Could you design a setup for us so we can display them in the same way in the shop? And then at the end, there's the design studio upstairs. So we do all our graphics in-house. We do most of our web design, our brochures, all our newsletters, Facebook, all that kind of thing. We do all that in-house. We know that probably don't get the same quality we get working with someone like Noel from DNA, but on the other hand, we know our business. We know our stories, and what we lack a little bit in the quality of the graphic design, we make up for by the lack of inefficiency of trying to communicate that to somebody else and losing some of that along the way and the time spent communicating it and them learning it. So, I mean, like Noel was saying, it's all within the company. There's not separate divisions or people outside who are contractors. We're all there together in the same space. My desk is in the middle. I can talk to the designers, I can talk to the graphic people, I can talk to the business manager. It's all there and we all hear what's going on. So it's very much a collaborative venture. And for me, that's the biggest reward of this, is that collaborative nature. It's working with other people. For so long I worked on my own, my little studio. It's wonderful to sort of see ideas go bang, 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 when on my own I'd be going, what do I do? You know, I'm stuck, and there's nobody to talk to, and you just have to leave it. So it's a great, again, backing up what Noel says, collaboration is really important. So I won't sort of labour these, but we sort of set up our core values for the business. We care for the environment, we care for people and the future. We pass on our culture, our New Zealand culture, our stories. We try to be absolutely open and honest. We don't sort of put spin on anything. We tell it like it is. We keep moving, never stand still. New ideas, always reassessing who we are, what we are, where we're going. Craft is really, really important. Craftsmanship, getting everything resolved. And we've gone round and round with designs, improving them as we go, coming back to them, realize we can do them better as we have more time to invest in them. Act ethically, obviously. Very important we keep a work-life balance, so everybody who works for me can come and go as they please. They keep their hours. If they want to go surfing today, they can go, as long as the job gets done on time. So we have agreed deadlines for jobs being finished, but up to that point, they're absolutely free to come and go as they please. If they want time with the kids, that's up to them. We help each other, and we also help other businesses and share our knowledge and our ideas. And promote our values. That's really important, that people we're dealing with, if we don't like the way the product they're selling us or the way they're selling it, if it's not caring for the environment like we think it should, we say so, we try to pass that on. And also the business model itself as well. And finally, the profit is not the driver. I'm not in business to make money, I make money to run a business. And I run a business, A, to produce things that I think are of value and have a place in our society, and B, to give a good lifestyle and a good work for the people that work for me. And the money is just to help that happen. So I'm not driven by profit. As long as we make enough, that's okay. And then where are we going from here? As you can see, a lot of the designs which I've been doing have been quite geometric, dependent to a large extent on the computer. And I'm quite interested in moving that shift away from that while still using that technology, moving away from that. And this was a bush that I saw in Australia a year or two ago. A grass fire had been through. The bush grows naturally like that, and when the fire comes through, it closes up into this form. And I really like the form. And first of all, just built a wooden version of that out of plywood and just hot glued the pieces together. And then sort of took that a little bit further. Also, these were CNC cut pieces. We find a better way to glue them together and put a light in it. And I kind of like the looseness, the sort of, it's still structured, but it's kind of more organic and closer to nature, I guess. So I then took that process, that vocabulary a little bit further and made this light. This is 2 meters in diameter. It's a great big wall light. As you can see, it's slightly domed. It comes out, and there's a light in behind it. And what I did with this, we used a material that we've used it for this light just to see how it looks. And you can see here, this is PLA plastic with flax in it. And we got this material developed for us by Scion in Rotorua. They'd be working with similar sort of products, and we got one specially developed for us, which we could use as a sheet material. We could carry on cutting like we were doing, because we use a certain amount of polycarbonate, and I don't like that oil-based plastic that will not degrade, that will stay in our environment for hundreds, thousands of years. Whereas this one will biodegrade back into the earth again, and it's not taking carbon out of deposits way down there. It's all part of the surface system that's going round and round. And the other thing is it's part of our New Zealand story, because it's New Zealand flax. So people can't copy that. They can't go to China and do that, because it's not China flax. So what we also discovered with this was that, if you go back to the previous one, is that you can heat bond it. So you can lay the pieces up and just heat them and they'll stick together. So there's a whole different way of building that we're investigating with this material. But it's also the vocabulary that I like. And it's sort of got me thinking more about the design process and the way in which things are going, particularly in relation to technology. Traditionally, in sort of CAD design, well, even if you go back, I trained as a naval architect, and I was taught to draw the hull of a boat, a complex three-dimensional form, on a drawing board. And there was a massive leap that went from working on a drawing board to working on a computer. But in effect, you had that same cross-link between top, side, front views, which on the drawing board you had to do manually. On the computer it's all done internally, which gives you the 3D one you can look at. But essentially it's the same sort of process, because you're still producing an object. And that's a computer drawing of one of the lights that we do. Now, if we decide that we want to scale that up or scale it down, we can scale it up or scale it down, but every piece will just get bigger or smaller. So we've got a little bit of adaptation, but we're kind of locked in with that object. It can't change. There's a new version of computer drawing now which uses parametric systems, which is completely different. And for me, it's as big a leap going from a drawing board to a computer as it is from conventional CAD to parametric drawing. Because what this does is we've drawn the same light as that previous one, the same structure, the same surface, in this parametric system called Grasshopper. And that is how you build it in Grasshopper. A whole series of functions. Each function says rotate line to make a circle, or sweep this to make a surface, or place a point here, or line from here to here. They're all functions which do things, and you link them together in a sort of vast network of wires, in effect, which build up eventually that previous thing we saw here. And it does everything. So we built this model with the pieces on it, and we've unrolled the curved two-dimensional curved surfaces into a flat one, which the CNC can cut out. That's all done in here. But the key thing is this. These are all slider bars. And every one of those changes something in here. So if we want to change that radius, or the number of points, or the shape of the curve, or the size of it, we can do it all within here. So having built the model, it has unlimited control to change it. So this completely changes the way in which you design something, because now every single one can be different very easily. And if you then marry that up with the rapid advances in 3D printing, 3D manufacturing that's happening, we very soon will have the ability to make every single design different. And that's a big step forward. So I can show you just one example of how this works. So there's one of the slider bars, a number of strips, a number of zigzags. By moving that, you can increase the number of strips. This curve here, you can grab these handles and pull them, and you can change the shape of the curve, and so on and so on. And all that goes right through, so the unrolled surface, the piece which you cut out in the CNC, gets changed as well, along with all this. So you don't really have to worry too much about how you build the model. You just build it, and you start tweaking it. Just a bit here, a bit there. You can really develop a design quite differently that way. And then it gets more interesting again, because what you can do is you can chuck in a random thing in here. Now, I've done that for this one just to create this layout. So they're taking the same piece and randomized it in the circle, or how it goes around there. But what we're doing now is we're getting a little bit closer to the way in which nature works. And essentially, if you take say a seed for a tree, an acorn, that acorn is a code. And that code can respond to inputs. So if you plant the acorn in different places, you'll get a different tree. You plant it down the valley amongst lots of other trees, it'll go straight up. If you plant it on the top of a hill, it'll get small and stunted and go sideways. Or if it's in the middle of a field, it'll branch out. So it's responding to, it's still an oak tree, and every single oak tree is identifiable as an oak tree. You can see that, but it's responding to the inputs that are happening around it. So that's one difference. The second one is this beautiful thing called evolution, because there is the random thing in that. So every so often that code will make a mistake. And most of those mistakes will fall away and they won't work, but occasionally you get the mistake which actually works better. So it survives and it reproduces more, and that mistake becomes the norm, and so we have evolution. So we can do that with design. We can chuck these random things in where we like. We can see what comes out. And if we like them, we can choose them and make them develop them, or we can choose to ignore them. So I can start with a design now. In 10 years' time, that design would be completely transformed, because over time, different parameters, different inputs, different random things, different thoughts have allowed it to evolve. So it has an ongoing life. It's not a fixed object that starts to look out of date. It's still the same oak tree, but it's continually being updated. And of course, some of your parametric inputs can be the market it's going to. The Asian living space is smaller than the American ones, so you can customize it to fit that. There are other areas of sort of computer design which we're playing with. This is a different form of parametric work where the parameters are up at the top there. But this is basically a design for a tree, which you can change the effect of the gravity or the way it grows, how far apart, how many splits, and so on, by changing those parameters up there. And this can be taken straight into a CAD program. So you can design something like this and take it into the program as well. So there are other versions of this sort of parametric software which are available. The first part of this is quite quick, but this is a process called reaction diffusion. You've all seen the sort of beautiful fish, coral, tropical fish, or things like zebras. They're all, like the oak tree, they're all identifiable as a fish, but every single pattern's different. And they don't do it like we would if we set out to draw a pattern. Nature doesn't do it by drawing lines and putting another one here, another one here. It has a code. And if I can rerun this, I'll go back and do it again. And if you can see what's happening, but it starts off with a series of dots, and the dots slowly spread. And there are certain rules which are embedded in it, so it means that it can't come closer than a certain distance to the next dot. So if it's approaching a dot, it will veer off. But they'll keep expanding until there's nowhere more to expand. And so essentially that's the way in which those patterns happen on fish and birds and leaves and things, is that there's a basic code which governs the growth, but then the growth happens and slowly things evolve sort of along certain patterns, but not repetitive patterns. And this is another way in which we can introduce this sort of lovely kind of random natural forms of nature without being too dogmatic about our design. We allow things to evolve and progress. And I kind of like that. I think that's the sort of way in which design can go. So that's design that's getting sort of closer to nature in the sense of this genetic code. And then sort of finally, just another, I guess, topic that's sort of very close to my heart in terms of the whole creative process is that, and I think Noel sort of touched upon this a little bit about his mentioning of craft, but I guess I'm slightly different in this sense, because to me, I think we've in the past we've had this sort of fixation about these kind of, what do you call the delineations, these kind of things of divisions of art and craft and design as being, are you an artist, are you a designer, are you a craftsman? Well, in the world today, you have to be at the whole lot. Creativity is everything, all these things. If you don't do these things, then I'm sorry, but you're going to be struggling. You have to be an artist to find what you're trying to say, where you're speaking from, who you are, what your voice is, what your vocabulary is with which to say it, and the message that you're saying. All that is your art. Then, as a designer, you start to rearrange that vocabulary, those words, those blocks which you've developed yourself, into designs. And then as a craftsman, you use your skills and your knowledge of materials to make them. If you're a designer, you don't do the art part of the process, what do you design with? You've only got forms and vocabulary other people have developed, so you shuffle. And you get derivative design that you see far too much of out there, of one of these put together, one of those. Oh, aren't I clever? I've got a cabriole leg with a stainless steel top, square flat top. Isn't that witty? Isn't that ironic? Well, next year it'll be forgotten. And there's no integrity. There's nothing that Denise was talking about, of her own voice. What the runway people liked about it was its originality. And that comes from being an artist. And you can't design what you can't make. If you don't understand materials and processes, you can't sit at a computer and think you can design stuff if you don't know the materials. You have to know how much you can bend a piece of wood before it will break. How thick the wood has to be to make a joint that's strong enough. That comes from handling the materials, not from sitting at a computer. So you need to do all these things. I've shown you a lot of computer stuff, but I can't do anything that I do today without that craft knowledge as well, and it's vital. So if you don't combine the whole lot together, you have art for art's sake, like this Damien Hirst nonsense where he spins blobs of paint on discs like we all did in craft fairs in the 70s. You don't have stuff made by craftsmen. This was out of the American Crafts magazine. I have no idea what it is. It's incredibly skillful. It's amazing, but what the heck is it, and why, and what's the point? And design for design's sake, well, we've run out of options on how to design a sofa, so maybe let's make one back higher than the other. Isn't that clever? Look, tall people can sit on this side and small people on that one. And you don't have this problem of the new and the novel. Novelty will wear off. There's the ironic mixture of pieces. There's absolute brilliant new. There's heart-stopping art that really catches you. I mean, this is over 100 years ago. It's Brancusi, but it's almost as new today as it was then. But that was out of the blue. That was something special. This will be forgotten because it's a novelty. And just a few very quick comments on, as I see the way in which sort of art and craft and design are going in the world. In the last century, we had the era of the kind of the rock star artists, the kind of grand gesture, that there's egotism of the artist, of them alone, and the imprint of their thumb on the work. Well, what's happened since then is we've shifted away from that into a much more humble, much more kind of repetitive, craft-based form of art. And this was from an exhibition called Roundabout in Wellington last year, I think. It was a collection, private collection, which exhibited of art from all around the world. And this is a Tibetan artist who lives in Europe, Gyongkar Guksa, I think his name is. And, I mean, he's drawing on his Tibetan Buddhist culture, obviously, but if you go in close up, these are all little stickers. And then there's all these little drawings that he's done in between that. So there's a meticulous, time-consuming work placing all these things and filling in the drawing. There's this sort of almost mind-numbing kind of repetition that's going on there, which is making up this artwork. It's not the grand gesture. It's the repetition. It's the humility which is happening through this that gives it its value. And I think that's a direction we need to think about in the way in which art's going. Another artwork from the Asia Pacific Triennale in Brisbane a few years ago. I wish I could remember his name. It's an artist from India, obviously. This is only a section of it. These big paintings of all these very beautifully rendered portraits of people very close up. But again, this sort of the craft and precision of this. And I put this in because this is Ben Pearce. He's an artist from Wanganui who went to the art school here. He works for me, does all my graphics work, but he's also a very fine artist in his own right, and he's got some work in the current show that's on in the City Gallery in Wellington called The Obstinate Object, contemporary sculpture in New Zealand. And he's someone who's able to use his craft at the service of his art. Now, traditionally, art is seen craft as this sort of humble, inferior, rather annoying little sibling that gets in the way, and it's a myopic and it's sort of short-sighted and doesn't really see things. Whereas what Ben's been able to do is retain his artistic vision and use the craft to express that at his service. I mean, like Brancusi. Brancusi was a master carver. He came from Romania where he carved wood as a kid, and he brought that knowledge of materials to his work. In the same way, Ben is using his understanding of materials, his craft skills, at the service of his art. And I think that's really important. And what we do as well is we try to tell stories, which is essentially kind of an artistic process. So this is an installation which I did in Milan a few years ago called The Three Baskets of Knowledge, the Three Keti. This is a Maori story, a Maori myth, taking our stories from New Zealand to the world. I like to say that I heard a quote a few years ago that if there were more stories, there'd be less guns. And I kind of like that. And it's what it's effectively saying is that in our stories are the morals which bind us together, which stop us fighting each other. Grimm's fairy tales are full of morals, and a lot of the oral tradition of the storytelling from the Maori culture are stories which are about the morals, about the way in which we live. And the story behind this is the same sort of thing. And similarly, the piece I had in Milan a couple of years ago, based around the story of Icarus. This is a more universal myth, a Greek myth. But it's a myth that tells of a guy who flew too high and crashed because the wax which held the feathers and his wings together melted, and because he flew too close to the sun. So the obvious moral in that is that if we get carried away by our technology, our ability to do things, the sun might get too hot and we'll crash. So these are stories, these are artistic installations which we're doing, but within them there are products which we go on and then sell as products on the market. So each of these lights we sell individually as an ongoing product, but the whole thing started as an installation. And we just heard a couple of weeks ago that whole collection, two of those wing lights and the solar in the middle, has just been bought by the Pompidou Centre for their collection in Paris, which is pretty exciting. So that's my story.